I'm sure many of us know someone, if not you, who's felt uncomfortable talking about religion and money or just have feelings of shame or guilt about it. Welcome to Yahweh's Money, a podcast where we discuss the crossroads or intersections of religion and money. We're going to go deep into topics like tithing and saving and debt and so much more from the religious view. I'm your host, Shay Cook, CEO and founder, Crusaders for Change, LLC, and our co-host is Vanessa McNally, one of our financial counselor, coach, educators. Let's talk about God and money. Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Yahweh's Money, the crossroads of religion and money. And today we're going to be talking about self-control and spending. I am your host, Shay Cook, and we also have Vanessa McNally here, our co-host. And let's get into it. Hey, Vanessa.
Good morning. I'm so excited to talk about this topic because this is something I think so many people struggle with.
Yeah, so many people. I know, even myself, self-control is something big in many areas of our life, not only money, spiritually, mentally, physically, when it comes to exercise and eating. The self-control always comes up, discipline, sacrifice. But, Paul tells us in Galatians not to give into sinful desires and be led by the Holy Spirit that produces the fruit of self-control. But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. And that's in Galatians 5:22. So, what is self-control and how can we apply it in our lives? God clearly wants us to have self-control and proper balance in every aspect of our lives, including our finances. So, how are you having self control and applied it in your life, Vanessa?
I think all these things are put in place because they are good and there
Mm,
is something wonderful with all these. But when you do too much of it and you don't know self control and you have a problem with moderation, then it can be
mm,
something that you actually end up worshiping or, you can't live without. But I think as far as self control goes, we all kind of have to figure out our own limits. We all have different areas where, we struggle with or things that are easy to us. I know I'm very thankful that I grew up in a home that taught me everything goes on sale eventually. So I never had to worry about, spending that extra money because, from the get go, it was wait, wait, wait. And most people
mm.
don't have that.
That is so true. I did not grow up like that. So I think we just spent very, very, I wouldn't even, we were not frivolous. We were just, as soon as it's available, hot and new, everybody else got it, you go get it, and self control, I think it's really self explanatory. Control. What do you have control of in your life? We really don't have much control in our life, but the things that you can control, like waiting for that sale, not having to keep up with the Joneses, the Kardashians, the Carters, as I always say, just really knowing that, okay, can I plan for the future? Of course, we want to live in the moment and live in the now. But if I really want to purchase this big item or small item, do I have the money now? If not, let's come up with a plan, have that control to save for it for the next day or the next time it's available or when we're, able to purchase it. And then apply that in many areas of our lives. I know in 2 Peter 1:5-6, it says, "For this very reason, make every effort to add your faith, goodness, and to goodness, knowledge, and to knowledge, self-control, and to self-control, perseverance, and to perseverance, godliness." So what does that speak to you, Vanessa?
I think it teaches us that when we're able to have self control, we learn something from that and we gain something from that. We're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, that there's a reason
Mm,
for it and we come out better on the other end because of it. And I think in the beginning, people can't see that. But later
mm,
on in life, we definitely see that. I know earlier we were talking about being younger, and you want and you want and you want, and you see everybody else has everything that you want. But if you can't afford it and you can't handle, the extra expenses or whatever it may be, later on in life, that's going to serve you, and you're going to be in a better place because of it. I know early on, I was always very, very thrifty, didn't spend a lot of money on things. But, I also went through a divorce where I
mm,
walked away with my car and my dog. So I had absolutely nothing and I was starting over. But because my early years were spent kind of being thrifty, I was able to work through that and not have any issues. But somebody else, who was just kind of used to having everything that they wanted, they would have problems in that situation. So I think because of that, the perseverance and self control has really served me well. But of course, there's tons of things I struggle with too.
Exactly. And when you say your younger self, I know in my early teens and later in my 20s, I just wish I knew what I know now then, because I was all about just maintaining an image and keeping up with everybody and nobody and always saying, "Oh, I'm unique." And in that being unique, I'm still keeping up with it, trying to keep up with everybody. So I wasn't really being unique, but I just used that as a way to try to separate myself from doing what everybody was doing. But I wanted to have the latest clothes and I wanted to have the latest fashions and shoes, the hairdo, the makeup, the perfume, all of that stuff. And it all cost money. And now that I think back, it's like, wow, Shay, really? What was wrong with you? And I'm like, oh, it's because I was young. But then I hear somebody like Vanessa who was young and was taught that. So maybe it comes from, and not maybe, I believe it comes from your upbringing and how you are. And then, of course, the religious piece of it brings a whole nother aspect, because when you're looking at scripture, at the word, whatever religious background you're from, there's definitely some early teachings, if that's what what you learn early on, that will guide you either way. And even though we were somewhat religious growing up, from Catholic and then later in life to being non-denominational, but in between they're Baptist and didn't have a family that came from Catholic and Methodist, a little bit of mixture of every of those different Christian denominations. I was taught, I don't know what I was taught. I don't think I really was taught anything, because I was more focused on what parents were doing and friends and family was doing versus what the word was saying.
Yeah.
So, are you familiar with that? Did you have that, or it was very clear that you follow the scripture and the word, very strict, structured upbringing in terms of religion, or was it a mixture?
Yeah. So, in my household, my parents didn't go to church when I was younger. My grandparents would come and get me every Sunday and to make sure that I would go to church with them. So I learned a lot from them. But my parents were very good at, waiting until they had the money or, just doing without. My parents, thankfully, had good careers. They were able to, to work, but they worked really, really hard, but they would never pay full price for anything. It was always, let's wait until, we can pay for the whole thing, or let's buy a used car, or, we'll save up so we can afford a nicer vacation or do a budget vacation. So my mom was always like that, especially. But it's so funny how different people who can be raised in the same home, with the same belief system, can have completely different upbringings. Like I have a brother, and I know that his grocery bill sometimes is more than I make in a month, which is crazy to me. But, we were raised in the same home. And I think it was just paying attention to, to struggles and not wanting to be in that place. And then having different friend groups too, because we learn a lot from our friends. So, he hung out with kids who had a lot of money and their families had a lot of money.
Mm,
And I hung out with people who, you know, might live in a trailer park or,
mm.
whatever it is. And I think that's something too, is who you surround yourself with. Um, but when it comes to religion and money, I learned so much from my grandparents.
Yeah, that's good. And even though you're raised in the same household with your siblings, your parents are definitely in different stages in their lives, maybe even different generation of their lives, decades in their lives. And they're like, okay, either they're really gung ho on the first one, giving them all they got, and then the second or third one, it's like, okay, you do whatever you want to do. so, so you have a different environment, kind of, sorta, or your parents are different, they age, they're mature, they're more wise, they make good decisions, bad decisions throughout that process of parenting your kids. But then they might be going to do a religious journey, so they might be more or less religious when they have that first kid, and vice versa for the second and third, and and more if they have more kids. So yeah, I definitely see that difference with my siblings. We are very different when it comes to money. I have two siblings. It's three of us, and we're definitely very different. When I am more controlling, and self control is more my thing, and discipline. Not to say they don't have it, so I don't want to offend anybody. But I was the first child. So, it's definitely usually that first one, not always, but usually that first one has more responsibility. And so that usually applies to other areas in their lives. And so definitely, I see in Philippians 4:12-13, it says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And I think that really speaks as well to, when you're talking about kids and growing up in a household, they might see a situation where the parents are content or not, or they're more or less low income or higher income, or they have plenty or they're in want. And those different phases throughout that journey as siblings, definitely can play a part in how you look at religion and look at money. But so my next question is overspending a lack of self-control, and how does it affect our relationship with God and our personal lives?
This is a loaded question, first off.
It surely is.
I think overspending can come from a lot of different aspects of our lives. Like, we feel like we're not giving someone enough attention, so we overspend on them. I know a lot of people show their love by buying gifts,
Hmm.
and sometimes they can go overboard with that, obviously. And I think it depends on how we're doing it too. I mean, sometimes we can even overspend at church. I know one of
Yes.
the things that my grandfather has been doing is he's been giving extra money monthly to some different churches to kind of help keep them up because there's been so many issues with the pandemic. But because of that, he's really having to watch his spending on other things.
Mm.
So to me, he's not found that balance yet. He has this heart of giving, but at the same time, it's so hard to know because I know for him, he's showing love, through Christ by giving, but at the same time you have to take care of yourself as well. So I think sometimes there's this line that's not as clear as we would like. But I think overspending can come from so many aspects. Like, if we're tired, we just don't want to cook tonight, so
Exactly.
we order takeout. Or if we're sad, we find comfort in things. We've been taught that our whole lives. So I think overspending can just come from so many different aspects. Or heck, even if you're happy, let's say you find out you're having your first baby. What do? You go out and you buy all these things that you don't need right now.
Exactly.
Uh, so yeah, overspending can come from all these things. And I think self-control is a huge part of that. But I think either sadness or joy kind of plays into that as well.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I agree, is it's emotionally or attached to emotions in our lives. So even though self-control might be an aspect of that,
Hmm.
but how much or what level of self-control you have may depend on the emotion you're going through or feeling that
Definitely.
day. Whether you're sad and you're like, I know for me, if I'm sad, I want to eat. If I'm happy, I want to eat. If I'm angry, I want to eat, or if I'm happy or sad or angry or have anxiety, I want to drink something, sometimes if I'm not controlling, if I'm not consciously, intentionally making a decision, say, when I'm feeling these certain emotions, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to
Mhm.
eat. I'm not going to go to the mall and go shopping or retail therapy, whatever that might be for you. That's definitely attached to that level of control and that emotion. And then again, adding God into all of this, I'm thinking, oh man, like Proverbs 25:27-28 says, too much access or excess can lead to our downfall. It's not good to eat too much honey, and it's not good to seek honors for yourself. A person without self control is like a city with broken down walls. And when you have scripture like that, it's definitely, you got to find a balance. But you also
Definitely.
need self control, is one of those things I believe God gives us and learn, regardless of the emotion, taking that emotion away. You should not react and make a decision led by emotion, but we're emotional beings. So of course we do. Most of us, probably 99% of us, let emotions lead us into many decisions. And even though we have the foundation from our parents, and even deeper than that, we have a foundation from religion, our emotion just wipes all that away. And like, forget it. I'm going to spend that $20 on that burger because I want my burger and fries and milkshake because I'm emotional. And even though God says I need to have self control and not eat that burger because I know can't afford it, not only financially, but in my waistline, I'm still going to eat it because my emotions are telling me to. So, there is always that. And I know many of us deal with that, but that's just how it is
Well, and self-control is not fun. That is not
sometimes.
fun for
It's not
anyone when you think
fun.
about it. It's not
No,
fun.
it's
It's
not.
it's something we have to learn and we have to practice and sometimes we get better at it and sometimes we're not so good at it. But it's something that it's not fun to do. I mean, yes, if I could eat ice cream for every meal, that would be
Mm.
something that I do for sure. But it's funny you bring up the hamburger situation. Like my dad and I were talking last night and he was like, I'm going to go get a burger and fries. And I'm like, dude, hamburgers are for rich people. Um, and it's so funny sometimes how that happens, that we're in different stages. But some of us go out more and spend more, some of us don't. But yeah, it's all about learning the processes.
Exactly. Exactly. All righty. So now joining us is Clara and David Hinckley, and I'll let Clara introduce herself.
I'm originally from Portugal, and I met David in college while attending college in the United States. We've been married for 32 years,
Nice.
and I am military and family life counselor. That's what I do for work. Um, I have a master's in social work, and we have 3 children and 1 granddaughter.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. And David?
And yes, I'm David Hinckley, and I have been a software engineer for my entire career. And I just hope I can contribute something to this conversation. As my wife, she knows more about this than I do.
Oh, I'm sure you'll be able to contribute something. Well, thank you both for joining us. We're excited to have you here today, and we're going to continue talking about overspending and or just self-control in spending. But our next question was, is overspending a lack of self-control, and how does it affect our relationship with God and our personal lives? So, according to the CNBC news article, consumer debt in the US totals 15.6 trillion at the end of 2021, with the household consumer debt averaging $155,000. Everything from mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, and student loans. So how do we feel about that? Is overspending a lack of self-control, and does it affect your relationship with God and personal lives? Clara?
Um, I actually was pondering this quite a bit today, and I want to say yes and a no. And I want to explain that. I want to say yes in a sense that if we're spending money on things that are not absolutely needed, and most of the things that we're buying are wanted, and we are actually buying what we want before we buy what we need in a very impulsive way, yes, it can be a lack of self control. But no, in a sense that there are things that we need that it's impossible to buy paying for all at once. For example, an education, that is a
Mm,
necessary debt because we hope it's an investment in the future that we can pay back. So, yes, we would be overspending for an education because tuition is extremely expensive and depending to where you go. But at the same time, it's not an impulsive purchase, if that makes any sense. Also,
yes.
purchasing a home may be necessary, or purchasing a car, which takes you to and from work, or some other mode of transportation. So, in that sense, no, it would not be a lack of self control, but in the sense that you are buying things that you want before you get the things that you need. I see that as a lack of self control. So I
Mm.
don't know if that made any sense, but
Yeah, it did. It did. David?
I think it's very difficult in today's society. Buy now, pay later. Everything we see is, give it to me now, immediately. I shouldn't have to make sacrifices for it, or even society thinks, everyone else owes me because someone else has something more than us. And so, in some sense, it's difficult, but it can really affect our relationships with God and family members. For me, I never thought of gambling as being a possible problem, for example. And I had an acquaintance, seemed to be a very God fearing man, and I hadn't really kept in contact with him, and I found out a few years later that he had lost everything financially, including his family, because he was introduced to online gambling, and so it can affect us, but it's difficult to not be impulsive in some of our spending.
Yeah, I think it's really cool too. What you're saying, Clara, about having our wants and needs, but taking our money to spend on wants first. I think that's something that, we don't think about, but so many of us do. And I know working with clients, we see that all the time. Somebody has a really nice car, but they can't afford groceries or they can't afford childcare, but they don't think about it. To them, it's just what you do. You just get that nice car, or you buy the concert tickets, or you pay for, the $4,000 prom event for your child, or whatever it is, and to you it is something that you don't think twice about. It just happens. And then, David, same thing. What you're saying about triggers, I think we all have different triggers. Some of us have things that are easier for us to, to not overspend on, and some of us have things that's just so simple and so easy to say, take it all right now.
And I think it's okay to have wants. I mean, we have to have a goal for things that we consider a reward for all the effort and sacrifice that we make when we work. But um, they should not, the needs should not be sacrificed for the wants, um, in that sense, because we can have financial goals, but the idea of learning to wait for, that reward for the effort that we put into our work, um, and first fulfill our needs. The second part of the question is if it affects our relationship with God. And we were actually having this conversation with, we do scripture study with one of our married children once a week. And we decided this week that we would cover the scriptures that you sent us and the questions that you gave us. And we
Awesome.
wanted to have their input on it. And my daughter actually had some a comment to make that I thought was great insight that I didn't even think about it, as far as how it affects our relationship with God. And she said that chances are that those who rely on instant gratification and live beyond their means, they struggle to identify the blessings they have from God,
Mm.
because um, they're so used to just, having or wanting all of these things and going beyond their means, that when there's a blessing, it just seems like it's not good enough. It's not um, big enough. And and so it may leave the person uh, thinking that God is either unfeeling or uncaring. And that
Mm.
person might start to withdraw and say, why doesn't God give me all these things? The person is used to, and then also the how instantaneous it is that we can just buy something. Well, and God doesn't respond
Mm-mm.
instantaneously most of the time. We
Most of
have
the
to learn
time.
to be patient and wait. So I think in that sense, it can affect our relationship with God. Um, and maybe I'm taking away from David, but um, we also came up with the analogy of the parable of the 10 virgins and the
Mm-hmm.
parable of the talents. We often talk about it as being ready for when Christ comes, but if we look at it from a financial perspective, one is encouraging us to save, you know, and the other one is encouraging us to invest. And so um, we were talking about how um, there's this relationship that we have between our impulses and controlling our impulses and then recognizing what comes from God.
That's good. David, did you want to add to that? Because I sure have a lot to add to
Uh,
it.
just a quick reminder that by our choices, we affect others. And if we're able to make some sacrifices in our lives, it might be a big benefit to someone else if we can have the opportunity to give. Whereas if we're only taking care of maybe what our wants are, then we don't have those opportunities to help someone who it's not just their wants, but maybe their needs.
I actually had one of my children ask me this question. She said, let's say that you've been saving for a family vacation and you finally got the money that you saved. And then someone, either in your family or a really good friend, is found themselves in a situation where they need some financial help for a while, and maybe it's of no fault of their own. Would you sacrifice that money and help them, and then wait to go on that family vacation that you've been working for so long? And I said I would. I would, because I'm in a situation where I can make that goal again, and that person is in a more dire situation than I am. And my child said, I don't know that I could, but I admire that you would. So,
That's
but we're
beautiful.
all different in that sense.
All
And I
different.
think it just, it kind of, speaks to the way we look at finances and the effort that we make. Everybody looks at it differently.
Everybody looks at it differently. Yeah, that's good. I had to sit there and process that. Would I do that? It depends on what area of my life I was in, because there was a time where I couldn't afford even a vacation.
Yeah.
So, but I'm always here to try to help family. And, thank God I'm in a position now where I could probably still afford to go on a vacation, maybe have to cut back a little bit on the different expenditures during the vacation, but be able to help the family at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have credit and loans that people can get these days. And they're like, well, I'll just do a cash advance or whatever. It might be payday lending and all that to help families. So I can still satisfy my own wants and desires, which
Mhm.
that's a whole nother conversation. So, yeah, that's a great question, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good question to ask yourself. I've never thought about that, to be honest with you, even though I feel like I have, I love giving and I love helping other people. But when it comes down to what you want versus what someone else's need, would be, what would you choose? That's a very good question, I think, for all of us to
Mm.
ask ourselves. And then what you were saying about not being able to recognize your blessings. That's so true. There's so many things. Even on Facebook, we see these things that, 20 years ago, if you saw yourself where you are today, you would think you made it, compared to what you had back then. But now we're not satisfied with what we
Mm.
have. We want more, we want more, we want more. And we're just taught that, the more we have, the more successful we are. But the reality is, that doesn't always mean that, it just means we have more debt and more struggles and less self-control in our lives. So I think there's something for sure to be said about being able to recognize what you have in this moment.
Yeah, and just be still in a moment. I know my issue is before even social media was around, I was constantly looking for the next high off of achievement. I was constantly wanting to achieve and persevere so I can get the high off the next achievement. And after I did I'm going to go to the next one. I never sat down, was in still to be still in God and really bask in what he had done for me in that moment, or the blessings that came out of that, really be grateful in the moment, because I was just on to the next one, on to the next one. And as I've gotten older and a little wiser, I still struggle. But even in whatever, financial advances we make with saving, or, being able to pay off the debt or in a certain amount of time, or whatever that looks like financially, but even just in life and professionally and personally, as I meet a goal, I'm like, okay, thank you. Moving on to the next one. I have to learn to be still. I'm like, all right, thank God that, like Claire is saying, being able to be grateful in that moment is very important, because then we forget where the blessings come from, and we're just like, all right, Lord, now I want this, I want that. And it's like, God is, that's not how that's not what he's wanting to teach us. At least I don't believe. That's not what the scripture says either. And be still and let him. And like Clara said, sometimes those rewards, God doesn't reward us, or there's not that instant gratification.
Mhm.
It really isn't. There's a lot of time like, all right, Lord, when are you going to bless me? And it's like, now just be still, Shay, it's coming. And it's so funny because I just went through this a couple weeks ago, and I was telling Adriana, our podcast producer, want to shout her out real quickly because she's amazing, her and her husband Juan. But we were talking about something, and I was like, oh, somebody hadn't replied to something, and I was just like, I want to hear from these people now. And guess what? Like the next day they had replied. And if I had just been still in God, I wouldn't be, wanting that right away. So, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I see that in many different areas of our lives, including financially. Like, I have a lot of debt. And so I want to pay this off. I want to pay it off now. It's taking too long to pay it off. Forget about it. We have a lot of clients like that. Like, I don't want to look at student loans. It's going to take forever. Well, eventually, if you just keep on paying it, you'll pay it off, So people just want everything now. And that's a big problem with our society. So that's a whole another podcast. So, but I know like in Matthew 6:20-21, it says, store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Again, Matthew 6:20-21. What is that? How does that speak to you?
I like I like that scripture because sometimes when I'm tempted and I look at something that I wish I had, and I'm going to tell you my dreams of things that I wish I had have changed. When I was younger, I would think, a big house, nice car. And now I'm thinking, I'm okay with a smaller house and I'm okay with a car that just works, it doesn't break down.
Yeah.
But it changes because I realize that, and that's one of the things I don't understand sometimes, even with the things that are going on in the world where people are so hungry for power and possession. Because in the end, when we go, we don't take any of it. I mean, none of it goes with us. Nothing. Not even a dime, unless somebody puts it in your coffin with you, but still you can't use it. And I just think, and I was my son unfortunately lost his job, but fortunately he got another one. But during the process, I said, just to help you out, because I want to make sure that my grandchild doesn't have to have this whole big change in their life because the finances changed a little bit. If I can help, I want to make sure she has things as stable as possible, and it helps her parents with their stress level. I said I want to help pay for the daycare, and then once you get employed and you get your first paycheck, then you're on your own. And they said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Here's the thing. I can either help you with this blessing right now when you need it, or you can wait until the day I die and get the money when you don't need it." And you would have said, this would have been nice to have had like 20 years ago when I needed it. I may not have the money to give it to you then, but I know I can help you now. And so sometimes we just think, money is important, finances are important, but what good is it if we're going to be selfish with it too? It's, of course, we need to take care of our needs, but we can't take it with us. That's just the way I see it. I don't know how David thinks about it, but
Well, when you go to funerals, I can't remember them ever talking about, what big house they had or any of their finances. It's the relationships that they had. And I I feel very sad all the time when I hear of people that I know who are getting a divorce, and I go, "Oh, that's so bad that it didn't work out." And I feel gratitude for what I do have. I have a wife who loves me, and what kind of price can you put on that? And it's something you
Beautiful.
can't buy.
Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah, you're right. I've been to, unfortunately, several funerals over the years, and We never talk about the possessions and the money in the account. I mean, that usually is a conversation after they die, and then people want to split things up. But yeah, it's not during that ceremony or whatever it is. It's never. It's about the person and the imprint they left on your life, and how much you love them and will miss them.
Going back, because David mentioned relationships, the relationships with each other, but going back to the relationship with God, one of the things that we do in our faith, David and I, is we pay what's called tithing. And we also pay what's called fast offerings. We are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And one of the things that we do is that once a month, we are encouraged to fast. So we fast with a purpose and a prayer. It could be spiritual. It could be on behalf of someone that has a need. It could be on behalf of ourselves who have a need. But the money that we would spend on our meals for those about 24 hours that we fast, that money is donated to the church at our local level where we live. And so whenever there's people in need of either money for food or some other needs that they have, electricity or gas or whatever it is, it comes from that fund. And so not only we are doing something spiritual because it requires prayer and sacrifice, but at the same time, we're also doing something that provides some temporal needs for someone else to bless their lives. And in a spiritual sense, we feel closer to God because during that period of time, we try to focus on spiritual things that will help us with that blessing that we prayed and asked for. And then with the tithing, of course, the church has a huge humanitarian program, and from all kinds of countries that they help, and for some of the needs of other members in other parts of the world. And so that goes to bless those people, whether they're members of the church or not members of the church, because they're very involved in helping, especially in situations of calamity, providing food and clothing and all kinds of help. I don't know if you've heard of the giving machines at Christmas time.
No.
Okay, so they have these, the machines where you buy candy, you put they're like vending machines. They're actual vending machines. But at Christmas, they have them all throughout the United States in certain places. It's a vending machine where anybody can contribute, and they will say what the money goes for. So you can buy a goat for somebody in Ghana, or you can buy a shovel for somebody in somewhere. And so you buy that gift, and the money that you bought from the vending machine goes to that person, so they can have their goat or their cow, or they can have their water well. And that's one of the ways that we help each other in the world.
Wow.
And so so we develop our relationship through faith with God. And David and I, the first thing we do when we get paid is we put that 10% towards tithing immediately. That's the first thing we pay. And then we pay everything else. And I remember one time when we were first married, we had very little money. And I said to him, we don't have anything for Christmas gifts for anybody. And we paid our tithing faithfully. And we hear, we will be blessed. But of course, we may not be blessed immediately. It might be, later. And maybe the blessing is not in money, or it could be some other kind of version that God thinks we need. And I was going through some drawers in my mother-in-law's house, and I opened up these cards. They were cards that we got for our wedding. And I started opening them up, and I had forgotten money inside. There were money gift inside the card, and we needed that money. And then awesome. I said, oh, you think we have to pay tithing first? Because if I pay them, that's less 10%. But we did. It's like, well, it's from our earnings. Technically, it's an earning. And so we did. And it was enough to get a few cute gifts for the rest of the family, because I love giving. And I hated it that we hardly had anything. And so, but that was just a story I wanted to share, just about blessings and relationship with God.
No, I absolutely love that. And,
That's
just
awesome.
thinking about being able to actually do something with your self-control. So, your self-control is to, have that fast, but with that you're actually doing something good. You know, that's something I didn't know about your faith. So that's really cool to me. I'm going to start doing that actually. Um
Yeah.
but that's something like when you have everything you could possibly need in your life and you're at that point, is it more fun for you to give to somebody else or to get something? That's something, that I think a lot of people need to think about too. My family, we don't do Christmas gifts anymore because anytime we need something or we want something, we can get it. We're blessed in that, in the fact that we can just go out and get what we need. So one thing that we do, my mom, she passed away about 2.5 years ago. And one of the things she had always said was she wanted a water well to be built in her name. So, that was the first thing we did is, we had a water well built in Cambodia, which kind of like got us with these two people that my dad happened to just meet that week, which is not a coincidence, for this young couple that lives over there. And, Clara and I used to work together in Puerto Rico. And when we were there, we had extra money coming in because we were away from home. So, because I had that extra money, every month I would take that and every month I would do a well for my mom. Every month a well. And just hearing the feedback, and the amazing things that were being able to be done with that money, that was way more than me going to buy a new purse, or have an expensive dinner. But we forget about what these little things mean and what something small to us, can be so big for somebody else.
Yeah, that's good. So, what are some of the ways to resist our temptation of overspending, like seeking wise counsel, maybe professional help, or even having an accountability partner, such as a spouse, family member, friend, or mentor? David, Clara, how do you resist temptation of overspending? It sounds like you have a really great foundation of giving, your religious upbringing, or at least your religious, practices now really help establish that. But how would you recommend some ways to resist that temptation?
I mean, I think of my responsibilities as a father and a husband. I take it very seriously, and I think, well, is that going to help the family or is it going to help me? And I can't remember the scripture. I can't quote it, but I take it very seriously when I believe Paul, he compares the husband as like Christ is to the church, and how
Hmm.
Christ gave everything for the church. That's quite humbling for a husband to be compared to Christ. And that helps me in making some of my decisions on my finances and other things on self control.
I've this was something that I struggled with when I started college. My parents were very hard workers, and my mother is really great at managing finances. My dad, not so much. My dad is a hard worker. He's good at making money and at working hard, but as far as spending, he's not good because he's very giving. And if there's 20 people asking, he will give to all 20 and forget that he needs to take some home.
Mm.
So, um, in fact, one time there was a man that owed him some money, and he went to his house to for him to pay the bill. But this man explained that he couldn't pay the bill because he was actually sick with cancer, and so he was behind on his finances. So not only did he not get paid, but he gave him money,
Mm.
so that he could buy his medication. But but whenever I wanted money growing up, my parents wouldn't give it to me. Um, and I remember the first time I made some money. I was actually a child. My grandparents were farmers, and to make extra money, they would help other people farm. And so it was the harvest of the wheat, and it was the time where you still use your hand and the sickle. And so I learned how to cut wheat with the sickle. And I worked all
Wow.
day alongside my grandmother, and I made some money. But the first thing I did with it was buy a gift for my mom. So,
Oh.
and I had to wait a year to give it to her because she was in Africa. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, we used to live there. But they never gave me an allowance, and I said, but my friends have allowances. And so because I wanted to learn how to manage money, so when I went to college, they gave me the money that I needed to be in college without having to work. Well, guess what? I went out, bought a stereo. I went out I went out, bought music because I love music. I had friends that sold back when it was Amway. Like
Yep.
Amway was
Yeah, I
really
remember
big.
Amway. Yep.
They gave me an Amway catalog, and I went
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
And and then, of course, when we got married, that became kind of an issue because David's parents are they budget. They're very control. They have a lot of self control with money, and they budget. And David had worked as a teenager, and so he could budget his own money. I worked for my dad. I didn't get paid much. And so I had to learn this self-control. I've had to learn to um, the difference between the needs and the wants after I was already a young adult. So one of the things that are important that I wish I would have had growing up would have been for my parents to sit down with me and say, this is how much is coming in, and this is how much is going out. This is what life is. We have responsibilities over a house. We have responsibilities for insurance. So I wish they would have sat with me to do those things. My mom is really good at doing it, but she wasn't very good at teaching it. So I had to learn the hard way, where sometimes as a couple we had issues about finances. And honestly, I don't like talking about finances because we've had such different experiences growing up. And so, one of the things that I think helps me resist temptation and overspending is actually being well informed and having knowledge. I always feel like I lack information in the financial world. It changes so fast, and by the time I figure something out, it's no longer so like something else is. So so I think that being informed and having the knowledge and having learned how to manage money from an early age would help with resisting temptation of overspending, because you become more aware of what is, reality, the reality of what's out there. And if as a child you end up spending all your money on something and you wanted something else, then guess what? Uh-oh, you're going to learn from that. So, yes, so as a couple, one of the things we did with our children, um, there was a time where they did have allowances. And the first thing they did was we taught them tithing, we taught them savings, and then they had spending money. So they divided up their money as they got it. But now that I'm older, I don't think children should get money for doing nothing. So
Yeah.
my opinion about allowances has changed.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we learn a lot too from, the people we're around. And when we're little, we don't get to choose those people, and those are chosen for us. So we either have really good examples or we don't. And we can learn both ways from that. But I think too, we have to remember there's this middle ground. We can be have too much self control, and we don't give to anything or anyone, and we don't even give ourselves what we really need or what we deserve at that point. But there's also where you give too much, and then you lack what you need because you're giving too much. So there's that little sweet spot we have to find, and I think that's really hard for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking of a lesson we had in church once. Sometimes we have like these special activities in church, and they actually invited a financial counselor. And one of the things that he taught us was there are many things that we can learn to do for ourselves. I mean, we don't all have to be mechanics or engineers or electricians. Of course, some things we have to pay people to do it for us. But if we just learn how to fix things so that we're not throwing away and having to buy new, if we do a project at home that we learn how to do and we would have paid someone else, so we can pay ourselves the value we would have paid that person and put that money aside in our purse for something that we want. And it was a great idea. I thought that was great. Problem is, I was never financially well enough to pay myself for something I did. But I love the idea. It's like if I need to put tile on my floor and I know how to do it myself, and I'm going to save that money and put that money on a savings account to use later for something else. So I loved it. And yeah. Um and when he talked about fixing things yourself, I remember with my parents there was a time we were so poor we couldn't afford to buy socks all the time. And my dad would make a lot of holes in the socks. And my job growing up was to mend the socks. And so I would spend every week at least a couple hours mending socks.
Wow.
So we could reuse them because there was
Yep.
just not enough money to go and buy socks. They were so expensive at the
Yeah.
time. And that's how we saved money. Growing up in the carpentry business, time is money. So when his employees would hit a nail and the nail would bend, they would just use another one and that one would fall on the floor. One of my other jobs was to go with a magnet through the sawdust and find all the bent nails.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would spend my afternoon on a weekend just straightening up the nails
Wow.
to save money because, nails were an expensive supply.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, we could save quite a bit of money. So we didn't have to buy, 10 more boxes of nails. And so there's just small little things that we can do that sometimes we don't realize are helpful. But they are. Now, don't ask me if I liked it because I see the value of it now. But on the sock issue, not to the point that I want to mend socks anymore. But the nails, I would straighten the nails. So.
But it makes sense. And not only saving money, and just thinking from my daughter, who is an environmental science and major in college and knowledge of climate change, I think it would save the world too if we stop buying so much and just reuse and repurpose and recycle our items. And we did that as a child too. My mom grew up with a mother who, and her and my mother-in-law too, they mend things, they sew. I mean, we put patches on our jeans, we mend our socks. Like, you were going to make sure you got full value out of that clothing item. Shoes, back in the day, they would fix your shoes. Now you just throw them away and get another pair. So I totally agree with that. Yeah, I mean, just reuse, recycle, is very important, not only from the financial aspects, but also saving our climate too. So again, another episode. But I just want to thank everybody. This has been great. We're kind of at time here, but any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
Well, I'm very grateful
David?
for having been invited. This is
Yeah.
this is the
Yes.
first time. I've never done a podcast before, so
Oh,
this
wow.
is wonderful.
Well, we got to have you back for another one, Clara and David. We're excited to be on this journey and for
So
you to be a
thank
part of
you for
that.
inviting us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I hope this podcast is going to do well for you and people find out about it because it's a very important issue. I
Yes.
hope you all
Thank
the
you.
success
Thank
in
you.
your work.
I thank you, David.
Yeah,
Really
thank you
appreciate
guys.
that. Vanessa, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's been, a topic I think we could continue talking about for a long time. But yeah, self-control is something we all need to learn a little bit more about. So.
We really do. And on our next episode, we'll be talking about family fears and finances. And you can tune in to current and future episodes of Yahweh's Money wherever podcasts are found, including Apple, Google, and Spotify. And please email us at yahweh@crusaders4change.org if you have any questions or topics you would like for us to discuss in a future episode. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day. And remember, it's always better Yahweh's way. Thank you for listening to this episode of Yahweh's Money. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the crossroads of religion and money. If you have any questions or suggestions of topics you would like to hear us tackle, please email us at yahweh@crusaders4change.org. Also, we would love to hear your feedback on today's episode, so please leave us a review and remember to subscribe to our podcast. To hear all of Yahweh's Money's latest episodes, please visit us at www.crusaders4change.org or wherever podcasts are found. God bless.